Welcome back to Analytics AI Essentials, Quantum Metrics webinar series dedicated to exploring the power and potential of Gen AI in digital analytics. In each episode, we'll dive into the best practices and trends of this hot topic with insights from digital experts. Now, when it comes to AI, is more data better? What should you look for in your AI-ready data set? And what role can humans play in AI-driven analytics? Today, on the second episode of our four-part series, Why Data Quality is Key to AI with Google Cloud. Take it away, Adam.
Thanks, Dylan. And hey, everyone, I'm Adam Dille. I'm the SVP of Engineering here at Quantum Metric, and I'm here with my good friend, Zeba Hasan. Zeba is someone who I love to talk to, honestly, as often as possible, because Zeba, every time I talk to you, I learn something from you. You're out there in the field. You know what's going on in the analytics space. So thank you for joining us. Welcome. And why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for the warm welcome. It's great to be here today, and I'm super excited about all the amazing insight Quantum Metric is providing through this webinar series, so I appreciate it. My name is Zeba Hasan. I'm a customer engineer at Google, and I joined Google almost 4 years ago and support some of our largest retail customers in Google Cloud today with a focus on data analytics.
All right, so we are here to talk about data analytics and AI and the two together. And we're here specifically talking about data quality and why it matters when you're building a solution with AI and data analytics. So first, let's start with, what does data quality really mean in the context of an AI project? Why is a strong foundation in data critical when you're building something with AI?
Yeah, so I'll say in the world of AI today, data quality is a lot more than just having lots of data, right? So it's about having data that's actually fit for purpose. So think of it in terms of a few different key components of good data. Is it accurate? Is it complete? Is it consistent across all of our systems? Is it relevant to the problem we're actually trying to solve? And then is it timely, right? Because these factors, they're crucial because our AI models, they're learning from this data. So any flaws will end up being reflected in the results. And I like to use this analogy, but imagine you're building a house. What's the most important part of it? It's the foundation, right? So you could have the most beautiful blueprints out there, the best materials and the most skilled workers, but if the foundation itself is flawed, then the whole house ends up being compromised. So sure, it might look good at first, but eventually cracks will start to appear, walls might start caving in, and the whole structure could collapse. So similarly, data is the foundation for any AI project. Just like a house needs a strong foundation to stand the test of time, AI really needs high-quality data to be reliable, accurate, and trustworthy. So if your data itself is flawed, your model will end up being built on shaky ground. And yes, it might produce some initial results, but those results won't really be dependable in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so you talked about that completeness, and you talked about the foundation. So in the context of an AI project, what if I don't have enough quality data? So what if my foundation, for instance, to use your analogy, is incomplete? What risks do I run then?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that really gets to the heart of how we're actually building helpful and understandable AI. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about cramming a model's brain full of information, right? It's about teaching it how to actually use that information effectively. So if we don't provide enough high quality data, or we fail to explain what that data means, we end up risking ourselves by creating a model that's kind of like a parrot, right? It's just going to mimic patterns without true comprehension. So this ends up leading to a few different problems, like inaccurate or biased outputs, a black box problem, meaning we're getting an answer from a model, but we don't truly understand how we're getting that answer, for instance. We also have an issue of limited potential because the model might struggle to perform some complex tasks because it lacks any necessary context or understanding. So things that we can do to avoid these pitfalls are, starting off with foundational training. So this is like giving the LLM a solid base of knowledge, like teaching it the basic rules of a language. So grammar, vocab, and sentence structure, for instance. But to truly understand and use that knowledge, we need things like feature training, which is where we're teaching the LLM the actual meaning behind the data. And then where things get really interesting is when we bring in context training. So this is where we're going to teach the LLM to apply its knowledge in specific situations. So for example, we can use fine-tuning to specialize the model in a particular area, like medicine or law. So it's kind of like taking a general language course and then becoming fluent in things like medical jargon or legal terminology. And then we can also leverage in-context learning, where a model can pick up on new tasks just by being given a few examples or instructions. And then there's also continual learning, where the model is constantly adapting and refining its knowledge, just like you would do with your language skills. And I think this is how we also address that black box problem, because context training, it'll actually help make reasoning more transparent, because a contextually trained model might explain its reasoning and cite the studies it used to actually reach a conclusion. You could also give it clear instructions in your prompt, right? So it can follow your line of thinking and provide more relevant responses at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that black box problem is the first problem you run into when you're working with Gen AI. It's like, I feel like I gave it good instructions. I gave it some data, but it's just not following my directions. And interestingly, just recently I figured out to do what you're saying, which is ask it why it gave me some answer out of that black box that I didn't expect. And it'll often explain the criteria it used. And I can go kind of round and round and coach it to not use some of those connections that it was making and to use more of the coaching specifically that I'm giving it for the feature, like you're saying, within feature training.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that also helps building trust, right, at the end of the day.
Yep. So that's incompleteness of the data. What else are people commonly getting wrong when it comes to building an AI analytics solution?
Yeah, I think we're living in the age of big data, right? So everywhere you look, people are constantly talking about collecting more data, bigger data sets, and more information. But when it comes to AI, more data isn't always better. And I think that's key to keep in mind. In fact, it can actually sometimes make things worse. So think of it like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Adding more hay to the haystack isn't going to make it easier to find the needle, right? So when you overload your model with too much data, especially irrelevant data, a few things end up happening. It can slow down processing because your model now has to sift through all of this extra noise, which will take time and resources. It can also make your model harder to understand and interpret, and you end up with that black box problem we touched on a bit ago. And then it can also reduce accuracy because now all of this extra noise, it'll obscure any real signals, leading to flawed predictions and unreliable outcomes too.
Okay, so I mentioned at the top of the podcast that you're out there, you're in the field, you're seeing definitely more breadth of things than I am. You talked about adding too much hay to the haystack. Love the analogy. What examples have you seen of people adding more hay to that stack than they need to add?
Yeah, I think this is actually a common problem. And sticking to the realm of retailers, imagine a retailer trying to personalize product recommendations for their customers. So you might have a ton of different information like purchase history, browsing behavior, demographics, loyalty reward program data, and maybe even social media activity. But if you try to incorporate everything into your model, you might end up with a system that's overwhelmed by irrelevant details. So for instance, I bought my dad a gardening tool set for his birthday earlier this year. Does that mean I suddenly want to start seeing recommendations for all things gardening? I will 100% tell you I do not. Or maybe someone clicked on a product by accident. Should that heavily influence the recommendations? Again, probably not. So being selective about the data you use is really key.
Yeah, it's funny, this kind of line of understanding AI, and there's two sides of it. Everyone knows it's out there, but not everyone knows how it works. And on one side of that line, you have people saying, like, for instance, at Quantometric, we have terabytes of data per day that we're gathering about our customers. And some examples on that one side of the line are, why don't you just throw all the data at it, and out the other side will come like all the answers to life and what that customer should do to go make things better for their customers. And on the other side, there's this understanding of, okay, it's data in, data out. It's the quality of data I give it and the things that I leave out purposefully. And then the coaching, the training that I give it is going to dictate the completeness of that solution. And on that side, the recommendations for things that we should build, they're feasible, they're likely to be something we can achieve and add true value to the product. So that too much data lies on the latter side of that line there. And when we talk about just throwing too much data at it, where should companies even start to understand what is that line? What things should I pull out and what things should I leave in there?
Yeah, I'd say a great way to start is, just asking yourself, what is it that you're trying to achieve? So what specific questions are you trying to answer? And then working backwards from there, right? So, identifying any data features that are most likely to be relevant to your objective. And that itself, that might involve consulting with different domain experts, conducting any exploratory data analysis, and experimenting with different data sets to see what gives you the best results. So it ends up being an iterative process, but I think that's crucial for building a model that's actually effective. The other thing we touched on a little bit is just considering the potential biases that might be lurking in your data. So is your data actually representative of the real world population that you're trying to model? And are there any historical biases or imbalances that can skew your model's learning?
Yeah, someone asked me about AI bias the other day, and I think when you say that the term, initially everyone's minds go to, oh, AI's got some like evil component built into it. But it's funny that an LLM was built to understand these statistical differences in the training data that it's been given. And so really the bias comes from what it's trained on, not necessarily the algorithm itself typically. And so, for instance, I'm a software engineering leader. I hire engineers. I see, across our industry, there's typically about a 4-to-1 male to female ratio in software engineering. So if I ask an LLM what that ratio is, I want a factual answer. But if I ask it to be creative, for instance, build me a story about a software engineer, society agrees that we would be better off with much closer to a 50-50 ratio of male to females in engineering. And so I want it to follow more of what looks like a positive direction for society. And I would want it to say 50% of the time I'll give you a male example and 50% of the time I'll give you a female example. So it's about how do we train the AI to not perpetuate those biases that we don't want to see anymore in society, but to still give us statistical answers in cases where we ask for it.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think you've touched on a big piece too, because, you might not know what you don't know, right? So you might miss some problematic data at first. So I think that's also why you touched on this, but it's super important to keep your eye on the model, even after it's up and running, to monitor it, evaluate it, and just be ready to adjust your data strategy as you learn more.
Yeah, critical. And when it comes to that human in the loop there, like you're saying, what role do humans play when you're building an AI solution?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hype around AI right now because everyone's talking about machines taking over. But the reality is AI is still just a tool. And like any other tool, it does need human guidance. So it's not really about replacement. It's more so about collaboration, right? We need people to be involved in the AI process at every stage. We need humans to ensure things like data quality, to interpret AI outputs, and to address any ethical considerations, making sure that AI is actually being used responsibly. So this could mean creating a system where AI augments human capabilities. So AI can excel at tasks like analyzing massive data sets, identifying patterns, and automating repetitive processes. Humans, on the other hand, can bring in critical thinking, creativity, and ethical judgment to the table. So I think by combining both of those, we can achieve outcomes that neither humans or AI can achieve alone. So the key really is just about finding that right balance.
And it feels like that balance is connected to risk of a given solution as well. So there are, solutions like at Quantum Metric, we have session replays, which are, the ability to watch back a customer of mine use a product that I'm building. And we found that customers were often asking the same questions over and over again: is what was this user here to do? And did they accomplish their goal? And when they're spending, we found 12 minutes on average per replay, hundreds of thousands of hours last year watching those replays. We can save them the time by answering those common questions. And the cost of getting it wrong is fairly low. I still have a replay sitting in front of the user and they can validate whether that summary was true or not. But on the other end of that spectrum is, Tesla self-driving. I want that AI to be as close to perfect as possible. And the risk of it getting something wrong is massive. So what do you think about that connection to risk and a human in the loop in an AI solution?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I think there's a huge link between the risk of an AI system making a mistake and then the need for human oversight. So like you mentioned, the higher the stakes, the more important it becomes to have human in the loop. Mm-hmm. So an example of this is, think of a model that's recommending movies to you on a streaming service. So the risk of it getting something wrong is pretty low, right? You might get a movie suggestion you don't like, but that's not the end of the world. But like you mentioned, if there's an AI system that's controlling a self-driving car or making a medical diagnosis, the consequence of an error is much more severe there.
Mm-hmm. And then how does a company go about finding what that line looks like for human in the loop or not, or human heavily in the loop for their particular solution?
Yeah, so I'll give an answer no one likes to hear, but we all give anyway. But the answer is it depends. It's not really a one size fits all answer, right? So it'll depend on factors like what the specific application is, the level of risk, and then the company's values. So I'd say a few key principles to keep in mind are starting with a clear understanding of the AI model's role. So what tasks is the model best suited for, and where is human expertise still essential? Building in any feedback loops, so continuously monitoring the model's performance, analyzing for any errors, and then making adjustments when needed. And I think this piece also helps to identify areas where human intervention ends up becoming necessary. The other thing to look out for is prioritizing transparency and explainability. And this goes back to some of the things we talked about with context training. And then, like I mentioned earlier, but aligning the model with your company's values. So we can use a chatbot example here, for instance, but this might involve having human agents available to handle complex or sensitive inquiries, or using AI to assist human agents by what Quantum Metric does a great job at with Felix, summarizing a user session. And I think the key here is really to just let each play to their strengths. The human can provide guidance, context, and oversight, and then AI can automate tasks, identify patterns, and provide insight that a person might miss sometimes. So ultimately, I think finding the right balance is an ongoing process. It requires continuous monitoring, adaptation, and then a commitment to putting humans at the center of the AI development process.
Yeah. And you mentioned company priorities. Using AI is a priority for just about every company right now. Every company is trying to figure out, how do I not miss the boat on this? How do I use it to help our customers do their jobs better? And we talked about how it's also not magic. There's no silver bullet. It matters the data that goes in. So how does a company go about prioritizing the initiatives that it takes to make data something that then flows into the AI to make a quality solution?
Yeah, I think achieving this level of data quality definitely is not a solo job. It requires an entire cultural shift, right? So a commitment from the entire organization, because leaders need to be more than just cheerleaders for data at the end of the day. They need to be active participants in the actual journey. So this means not just providing budget and for tools and technology, for instance, but it means also setting a clear data strategy forward, defining things like data quality standards, investing in the necessary infrastructure and training. And it also means fostering a data-driven culture where data isn't just seen as a technical concern, as it might be at some organizations. So if you're going into a meeting and your leaders are constantly asking, well, what does the data say? It really sends a powerful message, because it creates an environment where data quality is actually valued. So I just end on that with, leaders really need to create this culture by example, by asking the right questions, by rewarding data-driven insights, and also by empowering teams to make data part of their everyday work.
Well, it's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for the time. As always, Zeba, I learned something from you like I always do. I know our audience did as well. That's all the time we have for today. And Dylan, I'll throw it back to you.
Great stuff, Adam. And thank you all for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about how Felix AI, the Gen AI digital analyst, can help your organization unlock the full potential of your analytics, just click the link in the Docs tab. Or if you're viewing this on demand, in the resources section below. Our next episode is number 3, AI ROI, getting the most from future investments. We'll see you there.